Okay, no idea where this is going. Here's most of my 18XX collection and some semi-XXs. It's a pretty big collection. It's not the biggest I know of. But, I know people who have them all as kind of a point of pride. And, geez, if I had space, I probably, saw, well, whether I had space or not, if I saw them cheaply enough, I would probably pick up every single one just like that. But there are quite a few out there that I look at and say, I don't think this one shows me anything, just from the online discussion that looks terribly interesting. So, let's try. Now, I've been playing a few of them recently, and it got sparked really by the gift of 1844, 1854. Down here, a relatively recent production. Along with an opportunity to play at 1854 a couple of times opposed, it sort of sparked my interest back into the 18XXs. Now, that's not to say, I've always had the interest. It's just, I've been so tied up playing other things, and what's kind of funny is, I can remember when I first got 1830, just the excitement about that, but for a few years afterwards, I would set it up on, I lived in a kind of in the student slums. I had a room. It was a decent sized room, a little bigger than this one, but my girlfriend at the time and I were sharing this room and basically living in it all the time. But I would set up 1830 or some of the others as I got them and just play it straight through. Now, I usually don't play games straight through when I play solo. And 1830, though, there's there's a reflection to the whole thing, which is 1830 was one of the few games that I could set up and play. I could do Dune, I could do a few others. I couldn't do any of the big war games, and I didn't have all my games up there at the time, although I had enough that people would come in and say, "Oh my God, you have a lot of games," but nothing like I do now. Alright, so like I said, I've been playing it, and one of the reasons that I went to 1861 and played it was, if I do that again, because I'm so fuzzy on it, and there's still a couple others that I don't have strong memories of as well, but I'm just going to get caught in this cycle where I'll never play anything but 18XX games because I'll just be cycling through them constantly. I wanted to look at 1861 because it was the first of the 18XX games that I actually, I may have played it. No, that's right. I printed 18AL out afterwards. Anyway, it was the first one I did a video of, and it was kind of, wow, this looks cool. But I was already doing videos by the point I picked up 1861, and felt this pressure to keep doing things, right? Okay. So, let's start looking at them. First off, I'm not going to start at the beginning. I'm going to start with a couple of or semi-18XX games. The first one I want to look at is this Railroad Barons. I did this on video. I've done everything here with the exception of 2038 on video. Don't worry, it'll happen. It'll happen. Probably pretty soon. This is not your standard sex game. It's a card game. And what you're doing is you're basically making 18XX style decisions in a much quicker playing card game version. It doesn't hold up as well as I would hope it would. First of all, it's a two-player game. And I think it's only a two-player game. That's what I recall. Yeah. Yeah, it's only a two-player game. So it doesn't really catch any of what I really see as the dynamics of an XX. If you were to play 1830 two-player, one person would quickly get to the position where they're kind of dominating the board. Even if they're close players, I think one person would be able to gain control, and the other person would never have a shot. And it's the multiplayer dynamics which allow for a game of this nature to exist. And this game kind of fails on that. Otherwise, it's kind of like playing a Euro card game, a two-player Euro card game. It's not a bad game, but it doesn't really give you that 18XX feel, even though it tries to. Let's slide this away. Baltimore and Ohio is the next one. Now this is from the Winsome series. I don't remember what it was originally. This was Wabash Cannonball, I think, or something. I don't remember what was what. Maybe it was just Baltimore and Ohio. And yeah, it's got your familiar hex grid and your familiar stock market and stuff like that. But instead of, your track pieces, you're playing little cubes, and the trains are a little different. But it does introduce some of the ideas of degenerating trains, or in this case, it's just equipment, basically. And the idea of a company stock value increasing as the company runs in a similar manner to the 18XX, at least to the 1830 model. I enjoyed this a great deal. I've only played it the once, so I've heard some things where people are like, it's not really that good. It's got these problems. But I think it's a pretty good introduction. If you're thinking about the 18XX type thing, but you don't want to take the full leap into one of these, this might be one of your better entries. And it's also a nice bridge between the 18XX and the Winsome designs. Now, the Winsome designs are all different, almost all different, but they do have some similarities. And there's probably families in them and everything. I haven't followed, I'm not addicted to them in the same way. I've given a few a try. They look like clever little games. They're much shorter in general, and I feel the decisions are simpler. I'm going to need brakes and such not, so I'm going to take one right now so that I can get a bigger pipe. Alright, let's clear some space by moving this. I've got to reorganize my shelves, so I may be shifting things around. Alright, now to the beginning for me, and that is good old 1830. And so 1830 was not the first 18XX game. It was the first one I saw, though. I bought it because I had played Rail Baron already. And my initial thought with Rail Baron was, this is so cool, this is so great. And then it just kind of turned into, this is just rolling dice, moving pieces. What the hell's up with this? But I was really kind of excited about the idea of Rails. Well, picked this up, brought it to our gaming club in college. We just played instead of going to classes at times. And we broke it open, tried the short game. None of us had played anything like it before. And somebody, was doing well. Actually, I was doing well with the B&O, if I recall correctly. Somebody else was riding along with me, doing just about as well. And then I realized, wow, I can't afford to keep this anymore. And, just through fortune, really, I was able to dump the company on him. And he went bankrupt. And because, really, we had been the two people in the lead because how well the B&O had been doing, we were able, by hitting him and, and so many shares being in the bank pool, so he couldn't sell any or anything. It was enough to catapult me to a win where we didn't have to go all the way through the game. Although we were pretty close to the end, actually, when the bankruptcy happened. And I just looked and said, wow, that's so harsh, so fucking harsh. I love it. And we tried to make other games equally harsh, but really nothing stood up to it. Like, I mean, we would try to make games harder, like Crayon Rails. We would make it so that you started out with a weaker train to begin with and stuff like that. But it just wasn't the same kind of thing. It wasn't the, okay, you can make lots of money investing in my stuff, but I've got a knife to your throat all the while you've got that. And 1830 really captures that spirit so well. You've got so many factors going on in it that are sort of, to me, the defining features of the 18xx field. So you've got that rape and dump possibility, or just, accidentally, oh geez, this isn't working. But you also have the capability to play around with the stock market and slam people's stocks. And some of that is hurting them, but some of it's also trying to engineer your player turn order. You've got the idea that, in all the XX games have this, that you're not, the company. You're an investor in companies. So you have the opportunity, if you want, not to even run a company and do well. Something that most games don't really allow you to have. Some of the old SPI games hinted at this kind of stuff. I'm thinking like After the Holocaust with its banker optional role, or Conquistador also had a banker who didn't really get to do anything. But here, everybody's in that role, and it was really an intriguing position to be in, where, you weren't just investing in stocks to be able to make money off of some random rolls of them, or like Maxi Bourse, just off of what everybody's willing to pay for them. But that's some weird game. Instead, what you had was you were running a company, trying to do well with the company. You may or may not be running a company, but you're trying to do well with the company because you own shares in it. But you're also trying to invest in other people's companies where they own shares and are doing well. And it just gave such a really pleasant, rich, and competitive experience. One that I've not seen in any other multiplayer game that I can really think of. It just, it hooked me so much. And now, honestly, the whole series and the Winsome games in their sort of distant cousin relationship all kind of have that at heart. The, maybe not all of them, but many of the Winsomes have, you're investing rather than being a company. Some you're a company, I believe. But 1830 was one game, I knew a little bit about its predecessors. I think that's the 1829. I can't tell, 1825, 1829, I can't tell them apart. I played one of them, and whichever one is older, I think, which I think is 1829. And that was sorely disappointing. Now, both 29 and 30 are by Tresham. He's also the guy who did Civilization. I mean, he invented the genre of the 18xx, but he also did Civilization, and another game that I covered, which is Revolution, the Dutch Revolt. That's something I should play again. Somebody requested that, and that's not too painful. And I've played that a couple of times, and I really do like it. But this and Civilization were sort of, the masterpieces. These were games that, Civilization spawned spawned the computer game essentially, but it also, just grabbed so many people. And then the 18XX grabbed people more deeply. People became 18XX fanatics in a way that not too many people were Civ fanatics, because it didn't expand anywhere. It got bigger. There were expansions to Civ itself, but there weren't, and an A-Civ and all that, but there weren't really. It was such a perfect, simple game in a lot of ways that everything that came after it kind of degenerated it. But with 1830, it's not that clear that it was the perfect, simple game. And, it's trying to get, the 18XX series tries to capture so much. It tries to capture, the effect of everybody wanting the stock driving the price up, or selling the stock driving the price down, or how the operations of the company affect things, driving the stock either up or down. You also, though, had this, really kind of tight map in 1830. I shouldn't have put it away or aside, but you have this tight map that makes it very, very difficult for companies to break in and get into areas that other people, kind of control. So between dots and track lays and stuff, you can really kind of segment the map, and you can take your rich little area in New York and keep other people out of it or whatever. Which makes starting an early company, which isn't necessarily the best thing in the game, more attractive because you're able to get those important spaces. All right. What is the next? For me, the next, before 1829 actually, was 1835. Now, when I first saw 1835, I thought, wow, this is beautiful. It's actually nicer components than 1830 is. It's set in Germany, so it's got to be cool. It's got neat little things that add on to it. It's got the minor companies, which, you get to run it like a regular corporation, but you split your earnings 50-50. It's got the idea of the Prussian, this railway that, all the miners end up forming together to create, which will be this monster railway that is going to make really big runs late in the game, but it's hard to get a dominating presence in it. And then it's got your regular major companies. But there were a few things that I really disliked about it. The stock market was less volatile. The initial packet of corporations available fell in a predetermined way, and actually a very broken way from what I can tell from online studies. The corporations that come out after the initial packet fell out in a predetermined manner. So until one corporation was floated and running, you couldn't start another one, and I think maybe even until you bought all the shares of a tier, you couldn't buy out of the next tier. So what you really kind of saw was a game that was completely scripted. Now, I could see tinkering around with this thing and trying to make it more like 1830. But why fucking bother? 1830 is great, right? There were some cool facets to it that led me to say, I kind of wanted to do this, but I didn't own it, so I didn't have the time to invest, with it solo and figure out how to make it better. All I knew was every time we walked in to play it, or every time we ended up playing it, it was an overly long, underly interesting game. It basically, you felt like you were reading the same book every time, and it really came down to where you were sitting as to how well you would do. Or, if there was some random factor, like a person who really didn't understand the game and maybe they hand you the game. That was pretty much all there was to it. Now, the next two for me were the Mayfairs. And I was I think these came out before 2038, or came into my existence before that. These two, I got them at the same time. And when I saw them, I was like, ooh, there are more 18XX games than just a couple I knew about. Well, Component-wise, they're actually really beautiful. Better done than the 1830. Maybe the best out there. I don't know. 1846 is really well done component-wise. But these guys were the gold standard for me in terms of quality of the components. Now that affects my, willingness to play, my enjoyment, whatever. And that may be part of what excites me so much about 1856, which became perhaps my favorite, and it may still be. I mean, it's really kind of a question of, gee, I've played a lot of 1856 and not a lot of some of these others that I think are up there with it. Okay. With 1856, what's so exciting about it, it also has a nationalized railway. It has the Canadian National Railway. But unlike 35, instead of the railway just, sort of coming together, hey, when the four trains happen, you get to, so many companies can go into there, and then, eventually, you have a limited book of companies that go into it. Instead, the way this thing generates ownership of and components of the National Railway is that it has this loan mechanism. Something we saw in 61, but very different kind of loan mechanism. The loan mechanism in 56 is so brilliant in my mind, because basically you can take out loans, not an infinite amount, it's based on how many shares there are out there, but you can take free money and buy more trains and make more money, right? Well, some of that more money is going into your pocket. 35 was also probably my first view. I think it's partial capitalization, but 56 certainly is. 56 has a weird sort of partial capitalization in the sense that depending on when the company starts, depends on how much, I don't know if 35 actually does. I think 35 is full capitalization. 56 is partial though. Depending on how many, when you start the company, it depends on whether or not it starts at partial capitalization or full capitalization. But early in the game, it starts at partial capitalization. So you don't have a lot of cash on hand, but you don't really need it. The trains are cheap, and there's free money available. You can go out and grab, as many trains as you need, basically. But it teaches you this, I have to do something I'm not used to having to do. So in 1830, throwing shares into the bank pool was a good thing. So you kind of wanted to buy shares and sell them. You kind of wanted to make your company attractive early in the game so that people would buy the shares and then they'd end up in the bank pool. Because for whatever reason in 1830, when stocks are in the bank pool, that produces income. I don't have a good argument for why that may be. But 56 was one of the first games that I saw that said, we like the 30 model, but let's tinker with it and try to make it a little more realistic. Some of that works, some of it doesn't. So that realism comes with a partially capitalized company has shares in itself. And basically, as people buy from the initial offering, they're taking the shares and giving the company money. So the company gets its cash through that. Now, it's not a regular partial capitalization. It goes to that eventually. Instead, the early partial capitalization is you can only get 50% of your company's eventual capitalization until you reach a special location that's pre-programmed for each company. This tends to be a really, really fast moving in terms of, run the trains out early, hard, and very, very volatile game. There's a lot of rape and dump in it, and it just felt like it takes that all the things about 1830 that I loved and intensifies them. So this became my favorite with that. I love it to be as harsh as possible, right? We gotta swap batteries. All right. Another one that came out at the same time, or about the same time, was 1870. I saw them the same place. I got them at Crazy Igor's back when they had a real game store with people playing, inside the store, and just tons and tons of used and new games. It was just a great experience. It blew me away in a way the Complete Strategist didn't. The Complete Strategist had tons of games, but not as much, and it didn't have the space. And I'd never seen a game store like Crazy Igor's, just in terms of the total quantity of used and new stuff. He ended up running mostly as an online store. I don't know if he's still around. I know I saw him 10 years ago or so online, but 70 is supposed to be going largely in the Mississippi River Basin and a little to the west of it. Kind of extends things out from the 1830 model. There was supposed to be a game that kind of linked into 1830, and I think this is what it became. Maybe, I'm not sure. Okay, although maybe it became 46, which is also possible, because that feels like it links in there too. But with 70, I guess the big salient issue for this is you've got a lot of space between everything. And companies are allowed to play 2 tracks per turn as long as they're yellow, or they can upgrade. Oh, by the way, with 56 had some... So, minor companies are a big deal. So the 1830 minor company model, and that's the one that I've seen in 56 and 70 both share that model, is you have like 6 minor companies, and everybody's allowed to bid on them. And basically, if you're the first player, you're given an option of the first minor company or a bid on any of the others. And eventually, if one of the ones that's bid on, if people buy all the ones before one of the ones that's bid on, then you go to a full auction where all the people who've already laid a bid on it compete until they get it. And if only one person's bid on it, they get it. Okay, so the minors in 1830, there's a couple with interesting situations, like the D&H gives you a free track lay and a dot, I believe, or maybe it's just the dot. I'm trying to remember. I think it's just the dot. But then you don't have to be connected to do it. There's a couple that allow you, or one that allows you a free track lay. One comes attached to the presidency of the B&O, which is kind of a weak one, but it's the most expensive. But the biggie with that is, and this is, I believe, true for 70 and 56 as well, whatever minor you get, or whatever private you get, you can sell to your companies, to your corporations, for up to double their value. Now, in 1830, the big one for that was the Camden and Amboy, which it had a face value of $160, and you can turn that around and take $320 from your company when the Camden and Amboy is just about to stop being worth anything anyway. And, it's just this major factor in this rape and dump. It's not available in a lot of the other systems, but it is available in 56 and 70 as well. 56 has similar ones, I believe, with... I can't remember if you can rape for double in 56. Jeez. It hasn't been that long since I played it, like 2 years now, but it has a couple of really large $100... I think they can go for $200, but I'm not sure. But even just taking the 100 is a big deal. Companies, but one of them in particular, the Tunnel Company, gives you this particularly nice setup at the beginning of the game with one of the little companies where you can run for a lot of money, and it feels like that may be an unbalanced situation. I know some people see it as such. My feeling is, well, you bid on that tunnel, so and it's high value. It's not like anybody's going to grab it early. So if it is that much of a game breaker, it should be going for more than it is in your game. So don't look at me like I just broke your game experience because you didn't bid on it. 70s minors. It and 56 have ones that put a token on a hex, and then the company that runs to that token gets X. Every train that runs to that company to that token for that company gets a little bit of a bonus. That's kind of nice. And there's some little modifiers in there. 70 does have a weird situation. I believe one of the companies kind of auto floats, which always kind of depresses me. And some of these just come to an opening book type situation, you know, like that one company I was mentioning for 56, that's always going to happen. In 1830, there's a couple companies that almost always start, at least in 5 or 6 players. If you're playing at only 4, if you're playing less than 4, you're probably not getting a good game out of most of these. 46 can handle less than 4, maybe 89 can, I'm not sure. But most of them, 4 is sort of the absolute minimum that I see as playable. And then I usually don't really like playing in 4. That's too watered down. You have too much money, too much control, so you're not in a position in these harsh games, the ones that have real opportunities for rape and dump. You're not in a position where you feel, usually you're too busy doing your own thing to be buying shares of other people's stuff. So you're all in your own little world, and that's not 1830 to me, you know, right? But these guys are, as long as you're playing in 5 or 6. Anyway, with this one, there's really cool concepts in this. Corporations can buy back their shares, is one of them. And that's really awesome because what they do is they manage to get an appreciation as the share value is going up. And then they re-release those and put them back in the market to be bought from their treasury, paying into the treasury. This is full cap, I think, but and it's just another way to get extra money into your treasury. And both 56 and 70 have only, well, I can't speak for sure, but I know 70 has shares that are in your bank, in your company treasury, generate income for you. I believe shares in the initial offering in both these games also generate income, which is a reason to do things kind of opposite of what you would in 30. I may be mistaken about 56. There may be no income from shares for the company in 56. The big problem with this one is that the trains drag out too much. The middle and end of the game just goes forever. And no one ends up, in the games that I'm used to playing, no one ends up buying the final train levels, maybe the final 2 train levels. In order to do so, you pretty much have to slit your own wrists. You have to swallow or set things up in a really horrible way, and almost always what happens is the person who sets themselves up and can do that is the person who can instead buy a couple of lower ranked trains and like, hey, that's a better deal, right? Anyway, it just ends up often, you know, going on forever in that later stage of the game with almost nothing happening. Another cool feature in this one, though, is you have a destination in it. Unlike in 56, where you get your capitalization based on the destination, here, what the destination allows you to do is make an extra bonus run. And we'll see that again in 18OE. There may be others that have it. There's some I'm going to have trouble talking about because they barely are in my mind. The ones I played a few years ago and didn't stick very hard. 70 is one that was a big disappointment for me. I like it better than 35, but it just takes too long and is too painful to get through. All right. Let's look at the next one that I owned early, which is 2038. 2038 is a little different from the rest. You're not running trains, you're running spaceships, and you're not really carrying cargo so much. What you're doing is you're doing asteroid mining, and you're carrying the goods they've been mining. Unlike most 18XX games, with the exception of 53 with its expansions, which I don't have, I just have 53, you have an exploration element in this game where you move from hex to hex with your spaceship, and you look to see what you found there. Now, and you reach into a bag or whatever, and you pull out the chit, and you see, oh, awesome, it's ice, you know, or damn, it's nickel. And the different things that you can mine from the asteroids. And there aren't a lot of them. I think there's 3. This game has... It has 2 ways to start companies. Oh boy, I'm going to have trouble when we get to 41 because I vaguely remember. Only vaguely. And I'm going into so much detail on the ones that I really do know well. Okay. First of all, it has some private companies, of course. It also has a set of minor companies, a la 1835. And these miners, you know, can run a spaceship or 2 and go out and hunt stuff. They have special pilots who give them advantages. And there's 2 ways to start corporations. One is the kind of standard way, you pay cash and you float it. And I think they're fully capitalized when you do that. The other is to do a growth company, where you exchange your miner for the 20% president's share. And it automatically starts at a certain low value, I think 65 or something like that, I don't know, on the stock market. Ooh, I forgot to mention something. 56 and 70, I believe, are both games which have... I'll talk about colors of stock markets. 56 and 70 both have stock markets that are multicolored, and 1830 presents that as well. And that's one of the neat things that you can do in all of these, but it's easiest in 30. Which is if you drive your stock value low enough, you can break your certificate limit. And if you drop it low enough, you can hold as many as you like and some other things. But if you drop it too low in 70 and 56, there's a closed box. And people can drive you so that your company just disappears and you have no value at all for it. It just goes away. Anyway, I don't think this has that. But what this does, and this has like a single color zone where like they don't count against your share limit or something. But the complexity in that, you know, stock market with the multiple bands and different things going on adds a lot of little stuff that you wouldn't think when you first play. You're so overwhelmed with the, I can do this with the trains, oh wow, I can really whack someone. And then you start to realize, wow, I can run my own company into the ground and then make it go poor, and then it'll be like making money off the bank pool and all this kind of crap. And it's like I can hold it on 20% because nobody actually wants to take it from me, because then I can do something to hurt it worse before they do. Anyway, 2038. Let's go back there. So the second way is to start it as a growth company, which is a partial cap company. You get to keep your little pilot, and you get to run it as a corporation at the same time. You'll make less money. Remember, the miners give you 50-50, but you do get stock appreciation, which you don't get on the miners in this and 35. You do in some of the games. Well, 61 that I just played, you do, and I think you do in 41 as well. Okay, so this suffers from the same problem 1870 does, though, which is there are too many mid-level trains, and the game kind of doesn't push forward with them. Now, maybe that's a matter in this of spending money on the wrong things. But when you have a lot more than dots in this game. You have claims. And each
asteroid that you want to mine from will produce more value if it's claimed. Some of them, that's not a big deal. Like ice, it's $10 difference. And think of these as each asteroid is kind of like a city, because that's what you're really doing. You're flying your ship out to hit the different asteroids. There are some other things, transshipment points, stuff like that, where you're kind of taking passengers or something in one of your cargo holds, or goods that you're not mining. And you have to make it back somewhere, which is also difficult, in order to make money. So you have to kind of sail out, get to your asteroid, and then sail back someplace. Well, those claims are really important with some of the materials, though. I think there's 3 types of goods, and 2 of the 3, the ones that aren't ice, rares and nickel or iron or whatever, those end up being very important to flag. And then, to tell you the truth, the ice ones are kind of important too, because if you don't flag them, whoever visits them first uses them, and then nobody else can use them for the turn. It's not like cities in most of the 18xx's. They're an actual resource that only produces so much each turn. So there's some significant differences here. By the way, this is Tom Lehman, who also did 46. I don't know most of the names other than Tresham. Did 53 as well, I believe. Which is one of the most hideous in some ways. So anyway, 2038 ends up in this period where nobody wants to cough up the money for the spaceships that are going to that are going to crash people. And maybe they eventually come out, but if they do, it's this huge long period and nobody's really hurt by them coming out. Except the person who saves up for them. However, it, like 35 and definitely like 70, has some really interesting ideas that you kind of want to look at and play with. Now, the next one peek at is one that I don't know a hell of a lot about. I've played it a couple of times. I played this back long ago. The version that I played back then had random event cards and all kind of stuff like that in it. The base game does not. There were 1 or 2 expansions that you could buy for this. There was a funny player in our group who never seemed to like the kind of mainline 1830 based 18xx games. Didn't really get the hang of any of them. I'm not sure he got the hang of these either, but he owned this and 1829 for some reason. It wouldn't have struck me that he would have bought any of the games of the series, because he always seemed kind of negative on the whole thing. And he was unwilling to play 30. He grew to hate 30 because it's so violent and so unpredictable. I don't know if we ever... I think we got him into a couple games of 56, and he didn't seem to hate that as much. Mainly because somebody else always went bankrupt really early in that game. One of our better players. But anyway, this one has this really weird opening situation where you make this bid on what you're going to hook up with your major corporations. And you're kind of bidding on a major corporation and what you're going to do with it at the same time. And it's very strange. And then that money just goes away. You don't get anything for it, basically. You get the right to buy that corporation, is all you get. And you'll get that money once you do what you promised to do. That's the best I can explain that. This is the game that comes with the wooden elephant, and people have taken to the elephant being kind of the first player marker. It is in this, and somehow it's kind of expanded to other games in the series for that reason. This one plays with different gauges of track, which is a bit of a headache, but basically, you know, you have kind of like two different worlds of track going on in it, and I think there's a way to connect them and get dual gauge track or something. I'm not sure, or to upgrade your track to a different gauge, but I just remember this one being kind of weird and having some tediousness to it, but I couldn't really get a good grasp. I couldn't be certain that there wasn't more here. Like 29, I felt like I could be certain there wasn't much of a game there to begin with. 35, the first time I played it, I was excited. By the second or third time, I was saying, wow, this is always playing the same. And I perhaps played it more than anything other than 30, and probably like it less than any XX game except maybe 29, which looked completely hideous. This is on the weird side and the probably not too good side. That's about the best I can say about it. But I can't be certain that it's not too good. All right. Well, that takes me up to moving to Phoenix, well, all kind of other things, and then starting videos and learning, wow, there's still a gaming hobby out there, and there's still a vibrant wargaming hobby out there, and oh boy, are there a lot of XX games. I actually knew there were a lot of XX games already. Before I did this, there had been... I just didn't know how to get a hold of them, right? Like, there was a website that covered all of the XX games, and I figured, you know, most of them were kind of like, you know, like this, maybe homemade copies and stuff like that. Well, by the time I got on Board Game Geek and such not, I started learning there were others, and I saw a cheap copy, or at least a copy I would afford, of 1861. And I just played this because it's been so far in my memory, so now it's really good in my memory. And what this has is your corporation forming structure is made... You start off with nothing but minor companies at the beginning, and privates. And you can build 2 track per turn if you pay for extra track. It's got a number of little weird things in it, but one of the biggies is the way the corporations actually form is by... Well, you have multiple ways that they can form. You can do it with cash, but not until the 4 trains are out. Before the 4 trains are out, the way they form is you either convert one of your miners into a major company, and these are all going to be partial cap, even if you float it with just cash. Or, oh God. Okay, one of the partial cap problems is in 1856, it is possible that you can start a company, think you're going to run, and because of the limitations on the difference between a company doesn't operate. I don't think there's really a floating doesn't really exist in it. A company doesn't get an option to operate in 1856 unless it has at least as many shares out as the type of train that's available. So at the beginning of the game, you only need 2 shares. That's your presidency. But as the game progresses, and this changes late in the game, you can always, I think, start with 5 or 6 shares. But probably 6. But you can get in positions in this where you sink all your money into getting 2 shares and have a high capitalization because of it, and then, oops, you don't get to run, and you don't even get to start. So that's something really that can be devastating in 56, and I've seen it happen too many times among newer players. So with 1861, you also you float with 20% of the company once you're able to buy it, but you probably don't want to do that very often. You know, boy, things are just beginning to blur already. You know, I mean, I know the ones I really have played a lot, but this, I just played it. Okay, great. But I've just played these guys over here, and I can't remember them very well now. So we're going to be fuzzier as we go on. The biggie here, though, is this idea of merging companies together. But you can only merge miners to form a major. So if you don't want to just upgrade one of your miners into a major, you could actually take a group of connected miners and create a major corporation out of that. That's got some advantages and disadvantages, but you can obviously see you get a bigger sprawl. You have more starting stuff at the beginning. It does water down the stocks a little bit, but it doesn't look like it's to a significant economic disadvantage to do so. This is a very, very friendly game. It's still competitive, but it's not the same kind. First of all, there's no raping and dumping, and I'll tell you this much: you don't see the rape and dump going on much in 1835, 53, or 2038 out of the ones I've talked about. You might see it in 2038 sometimes, but in general, 1835 is the worst of these. Your shares are so important. Owning a company is so important that you can't, and being able to exceed your certificate limit, that you just can't afford to give up a company in order to try to bonus one of your other companies. And that kind of... Also, the stock market's less volatile. When you sell shares, it only goes down one space, so you're not hurting the other person as much. Anyway, with 61, if anybody sells shares other than the president, it doesn't even lower the stock value. This is very, very pleasant. It's impossible to go bankrupt in this one. Instead, you have loans. And if you're in a situation where loans aren't going to cover your ass, you have a nationalized railway. That nationalized railway doesn't operate the way it does in the other games that have it that I've talked about so far. So, for example, 56, 35 have a nationalized railway, but it's one into which people's failed companies get dumped. But no, in 56 it's the failed companies. In 35, it's just the miners convert to it. But it's something people own shares in, and it can be a very powerful railway running on the game. 1861, the National Railway ends up throwing dots all over the place and making life difficult. But its main operating reason in the game is to just run and buy trains. It's a time... it's a clock on the game. And that means the trains are going to fall a little faster than you would think otherwise. And we'll see another game that does that is 18OE, although it does it through a different mechanism. Just make sure... Oh, wait, is it OE? Oh, God, no, I'm getting lost. I'm going to have to start looking at the rules as I go through this. Okay. And there's also, just this, you can't get hurt that bad in 61. Now, failing to make the big money early on is bad, but it's not as bad as it is in some of the other games. Having a company end up with no train, it's not terrible. It crashes into the National Railway. You still get money back for it. So it's not like it just disappears. It's not like, an airline or something going bankrupt where, your stock's worthless, the company still continues or something. No, the national company pays you a fair value on your miners when they crash into it, and on your company stock if it crashes in. So it becomes sort of a minor setback at any given time to have something crash when you didn't expect it to. It can be enough to cost you the game, but it's minor in the sense that it doesn't end your game, right? And if you were doing very well, it doesn't drop you from first place to fifth place. It drops you maybe out of first, but it's not going to throw you all the way back down. What we saw in my playthrough was in my last playthrough, it was a remarkably close game. And I kind of have a worry that because it's so smooth, that all games of it are going to be fairly close. All right, where do we go from there? 1841 is one. I bought 1861. I had wanted this before I even knew about 61's existence. Apparently 61 was based on some of the ideas of this. We'll talk about that in a little bit. It was one of my more recent buys. This is not 18 Nebraska. This is actually 18 EU. I think the next one that I had was this 1889. I'm going to have to look in it, I think. A friend of mine, or at least a gaming buddy locally, who liked my videos, offered to make me a copy. There's print and play components available, and he made some nice laminated pieces. I don't remember too much about this. I know that the terrain in it is rough. It's very difficult, and it doesn't hold a lot of people. I think it holds 4 players maximum. The terrain's very, very difficult to run through. Looks like it's $80 per hex for this stuff to go through. I don't remember anything else. Like, I almost want to say it felt kind of like, a watered down 1830. Now there were, but with this rough terrain to deal with and high costs from that. I did play it. Look to my videos to see. I'm drawing a blank on most of these. I remember enjoying it. There are 2 others that I can talk to before I go further, because these actually came earlier, back when I had, when I got 61, I played 18AL and 18GA. And both of them seemed almost completely to be watered down versions of 1830. They didn't really add anything interesting to the game. No new mechanisms to play with. Nothing new to explore. But they were tamed a little bit. I don't remember quite how. And the track wasn't as congested and hard to deal with as 30. This one, I think, deals very much with trying to deal with that congested, difficult track more than anything else. And if it's a 4-player game maximum, chances are you're not going to see a lot of rape and dump going on in it. 1860. Now, I have really fond memories. I enjoyed this. Kind of like 61. It's, look out, good components. It's a smaller game. By the way, 61, out of everything I've talked about beforehand, 61's fairly short. 89's fairly short. I remember this one being pretty short too. Now this had a flat stock track. Flat stock tracks were the original 1829 game had. And I think it has the cool, hey, if you make runs that are multiples of your stock value, you go up multiple times. What that allows you to do, and in a lot of ways, a lot of the advances and changes that different games have, what that allows you to do is to, you can swallow a couple of times and then make up that ground on the big trains that you buy at that point. Now, there's usually a limit to how many times you can go forward. Like, you can only go forward 3 times. This has destinations. Jeez. Has companies in receivership. Oh. Where they run on their own and try to work their way up to getting a train. Right? Becomes insolvent and can start leasing. Yeah, they lease trains and can start getting them. Trying to remember what else there was here. 1870 opened up the idea, at least as far as my experiences, of paying out half. And I don't remember, I think 2038 follows that up, and 1861 has it as well, where if you have the option to either swallow the entire revenue of your run or pay it out to the shares in most of the games. Well, 1870 added this third option of you can take half the money and pay the rest out to the shareholders. And what they did with that was you go forward when you pay out, you go back when you don't pay anything, and you stand still if you pay out half. 1861 twists that a little bit with whenever you pay out, I don't care if it's half or full, if you can't match your stock value, you stand still. And if you match your stock value, you go forward. This one gives you multiples, and I think you go forward. I don't remember if you can pay out half in this one, but a number of them have paying out half. With the multiples in it, a small number, perhaps. Yeah, this is just pay out or swallow. But it does give you the multiples. Now this has a special railway, the Southern Railway, in it, which is, I guess, one of these composites. I remember really liking this one, but I cannot remember. Oh, yeah. So this has a composite of companies that are not running for a lot of money. They start getting absorbed into the equivalent to the national. I remember really liking this one, and I wish I'd played this again more recently to help recall it. But then I'm already having things blur that I played very recently, and that's not good. And it's sort of a sign that I could never do this. I would have to play, the old ones, even 2038, that I haven't played for a long, long time, I played enough of that I have pretty good memories of them. But these newer ones, I don't have really a lot to remember about them. Newer to me. 1826 is in France. I remember this one being kind of interesting, but you had, if I recall correctly, sort of everything kind of swarmed around Paris. Unfortunately, this is a paper segmented one. I've got the same problem with 41, but this one, somebody did they bought the kit and they laminated and did nice stuff. I didn't do that. I wish whoever had bought 40, whoever I bought 41 from had that. Or maybe... no, that's the initial offering trains here. Okay. And yeah, unfortunately, I don't remember a whole hell of a lot about this one either. I remember enjoying it. And this is, why I don't know if this is even possible, what I'm trying to do. I think we have a national railway here. Yeah. Out of mergers, I don't know what the requirements of mergers are in it, but probably lack of train or something like that. And then you have bonds, which are kind of like the loans, if I recall correctly. I don't remember what terribly differentiates this from 56. Yeah, see, here's Paris. All kind of companies coming out of there. That did not appeal to me. You basically have this wide open map with everybody coming out in one direction, kind of radially, and I thought that was a little uninteresting, to tell the truth. Okay. Now we continue into a period that I remember a little bit better. 1841 This was one that I was desiring to play for a long time. And I ended up buying sort of a kit version that was uncut or anything, and instead of laminating it, I left it as is. And it's not too bad, but the tokens, they're counters. They're counters with stickers on them, actually. Why do I have so many bags? So this is Northern Italy. But this one's about borders more than anything else. Uh-oh. Yeah, we're going to have to stop.
What's so special about 41 is that they threw everything into this. Mergers, minors, all kinds of those. Mergers between major companies. But I guess the biggest thing that struck me of it, of everything that struck me of it, my thought was, one that after I played 61, I was like, I want a game that allows me to merge major companies. Well, this is the one, and this was something of the inspiration for it. I'm just looking for where and if the rules are here. I wonder if they're not. Oh, yeah, they are. These are the rules. I'm so used to games with, I don't know, decent sized rule books. You also have a way to shorten the game with light. There's tons and tons of companies in it, of different varieties. So let's see what I can recall about it from here. As you can watch my review of it. But the biggest feeling that I got out of it was it felt a little overblown. It felt like there was a little too much going on. Most of the ones, like 1856, 1835 is about the formation of the Prussian. 1856 is about credit and easy money, 1830 is about robber barons and this, that, and the other. This one's about, let's see how many special rules we can throw in together. Now, some of the games, and I believe this was one of them, 61 was one of them, start adding new tiles and new track that aren't just, hey, this is this city and we wanted to make a special tile for this city to represent its importance and special qualities that were different from your normal 18XX city. What happens is some of them say, why isn't this piece of track in the normal old 1830 counter mix? And they'll add those kind of pieces of track to them. And this is one that has all kinds of different tracks in it. One of the things that this one really added, though, was the idea of borders, where companies couldn't cross borders without, I don't remember what. The bidding sequence for this is, the bidding sequence for 1861 is different than for most of them. I've talked about 1835s. Most of the rest kind of follow an 1830 bidding sequence. 53 has its own special one. 61 has one where everything goes up to a normal auction. So each private comes up, each player gets to auction on it. Same thing happens when you try to start a minor company. Person decides to put it up for auction, everybody's allowed to auction it on. Which means that you have what feels like a more natural capability to gain control of things. It's not, so determined by what your seating order is, but rather how much cash you have and how much you're willing to commit to it. What I found is usually that means that somebody can say, yeah, okay, you have $140, I'll bid $145 on this, right? This one uses secret bidding, kind of like 53 at the beginning,
on concessions. Now, what are concessions? Everybody's got to get one, and I don't remember if these are the minors in this. I think these are the minors in this, and or the rights to build rails in a certain area. Wow. You know, I played this not long ago, and I can't remember a damn thing about it. And it's got really, really painful rules, so it's hard to see what's going on in it that's particularly exciting. You've got some historical rules where specific companies switch into becoming other companies and stuff like that that's going on in it. Corporations are, I think, able to buy their own stock and sell it back. It's probably a partial capitalization game then. You're allowed to merge majors together or minors together. When you merge minors together, they turn into a major, kind of like 61 there. You have variants to how the borders change and what the effects are for that. Anyway, I played it and kind of felt like, as I often do with some new systems in an 18xx, gosh, I don't really know what's going on. I had fun with it, but it felt like, and it didn't, it didn't have this horrible dragging that the games that I really dislike kind of have. It certainly didn't feel deterministic the way 35 feels. Instead, it felt a little overburdened. It felt like there were just too many choices. And that may be the problem with 61 that some people have. There's so many choices, and none of them, and many of them lead you to the right path. And that may be the case on this one. You have so many different mechanisms and tools to play with. I kind of like that. But here, I just felt like I was, struggling so much to try to play the game by the rules. And part of that has to do with the lousy rule set. Alright, I need a break because my throat is killing me. And we could definitely use some time for the batteries to charge. Okay, now we're working down towards the ones that I remember a little bit more about, but still, like the ones in the middle, I haven't played these enough to have a really great idea of what's going on. So, my 18xx playings kind of went on hiatus for a while, largely because I didn't want to face 2038. Yeah. And, I didn't want to replay games that I've already gotten on video because I have so many I haven't played that aren't XXs. And I was kind of, I had 18EU in hand, but didn't get to it. And then, as I said, somebody gave me a fine gift of this in exchange for covering it. And at the same time, I got the chance to fiddle around with it and then go play it opposed. Well, to play 1854 opposed. Managed to play 2 opposed games of 1854, fiddle with it a little before I played, and then play a video version of it as well. Now, the weirdest thing is, it comes with both German and English rules in the box, but whatever. There's 2 games in this box, not one, and I gotta close the door also. I'll wake people. Well, person. I'm gonna deal with 54 first, because it's the one that I played first. 54 has some really weird crap going. First of all, both 54 and 44 deal with tunnels. Okay, what's up with that? Well, tunnels are, in both cases, a way to kind of run through a hex without dealing with anything. But in 54, it's more of a, you can build tunnels wherever you like. Now, some people don't like that and have made some optional rules because you can make hexes unplayable. You can make it so companies can't really start, can't upgrade their hexes and such not, by using tunnels as a weapon. And the fact that you have to kind of house rule to make the game work for some people, I'm not entirely convinced that it's necessary. I think that that weapon is a means of preventing people from starting companies that they shouldn't be starting. They don't have the proper control. It's like in 1830, if you control the ooh-oohs, you can make somebody else who starts the Erie very unhappy by never releasing them. Well, here though, there's no real cost on you. Your company pays a little bit of money to blast a tunnel. This game also has a little mini map, which has nothing to do with the main map, but it's an insert in the main map. And it's just sort of like this separate plane the minor companies in it are playing on. Those minor companies will later be allowed to merge, and there's 6 minors to begin the game, and they turn into 3, I don't know what they are. They're major companies, but they have kind of different share types, I think. And, they also have the opportunity. They have the ability to run obsolete trains. So the old 2 trains. Well, those can go double obsolete, but the old 3 trains that got thrown, that got thrown away way back. Well, they come back, but only certain companies can actually use them. I don't know. There's a lot of kind of stuff in this that makes me less thrilled with it than I think I should be. However, it has one hell of a train rush in it, and that makes it kind of interesting. I think everything else about it I'm less excited about, but the way the game falls out, there's the possibility of the trains coming out really fast or stupidly fast, depending. If somebody really tries to push the trains, they will come out stupidly fast. I don't think there's a way that you can play it reasonably and not have the trains coming out pretty fast. 1844 uses the same tunnel pieces, which is one reason they're in a box together. Now, 44 had some really weird stuff. Like, it has a big hunk of track that you place all at once, a huge tunnel sort of connection. It runs off of, did 54 as well? 44 has east-west connections with value bonuses for it. To me, it seemed like it was the stronger of the 2 games. Yeah. 44 has the edge of the board connections. So if you can run from the east edge of the board to the west edge of the board, you get a bonus on that. We'll see that again in 46. And kinda here, but that's something else. And those just give you an extra bonus for each of the red areas that you're hitting. One in the east, one in the west, if you've got that east-west connection. and some of the red areas have a more valuable bonus than others. So you kind of jockey to try to get that nice big long route. This was one, I'm trying to remember the trains in it. It seemed, to me, it felt like more of an engineering game than some of the others, in that you're relying more on trying to. Oh, this also had little railways, mountain railways, and with the tunnels as well. What happens is the company buys the corporation buys a company, or the player buys a company that provides either a mountain railway type thing, which is like just something that you can connect to. And if anybody connects to it, now your little thing becomes sort of like a private company, but it doesn't count against your certificate limit. And it runs, it gives some good runs for your trains, and you have some selection as to which ones you want. And with the tunnels, likewise, as soon as somebody runs through and actually uses a tunnel for a valid paying route, then your tunnel company starts making money from then on, kind of like a private company. The 54 auction was the same as a 30 auction, except you have these minor companies built into there. I think there was something funky about the auction in this one. Yeah. So the auction in 44 is more of a 61 style auction. You go through each of the privates. Now, who gets to auction the company off rotates by seating order rather than jumping around. 61 has some weird stuff going on where the priority deal can move in weird ways. Overall, I thought these were good games. 54 feels a little underdeveloped, and I'm kind of surprised that we played it in the group that we had. 44 is a little longer. 54 is probably an 1860 length game. 44 is a little bigger. I felt 44 looked like it was the more interesting of the two. And I did those bids recently, so I kind of know the quality of them. This is not 18 Nebraska. This is 18 EU, which is a very small map. Not tiny, but I mean, a normal 18XX map, but covering all of Europe. And here you have, I believe, the east-west connections. This one does something that is different from anything else except 18OE that I've seen. Now, there may be several games that use this. Instead of the kind of curved track, which ends up making the board difficult to find the right route, in by which I mean you have a train. Sometimes it's hard to go in where you want to go because somebody's built the track to favor their train going in the opposite direction. So you just find that the junctions of track end up driving in the wrong directions. And then it's hard to find upgrades that'll help you out. Well, these two games share a single type of track, which just says junctions are junctions. So you have kind of right angle junctions or whatever, and trains can just shift at them. That does something very interesting, which I wouldn't have expected necessarily. It makes the track towards the end of the game so open, and also there aren't blocking cities all over the place and everything. So open that you can basically fight your way through so that you can make any run you like, pretty much at any distance you like. So if you've got a 4 train and you want to run across the board, east to west, you can do that in this game. I'm trying to remember what else was going on in it. I remember it being pretty mellow. You have minor companies, and they end up promoting into corporations, if I recall correctly. Maybe a mistake. No. So corporations are started as normal, but then miners are allowed at various points in the game, and eventually must, to sort of merge into the corporation, and you get a share of a stock of that corporation in exchange for your miner, which is kind of an interesting, it's not dumping them all into one place. If there's no share of stock available, you still have to join, but you don't get anything for it, which kind of sucks. Small number of railways, there's only 3 corporations in it, or 6 corporations in it, I'm sorry. Trying to remember what else, if there was anything that really excited me about it. That different kind of track, it opens things up, but it also means you have tons of options with every one of your trains. So it makes figuring out which trains run where to be more of a hassle and a headache than you normally think. And I remember being very unhappy with this one and thinking, I'm not, not just for that, but it wasn't very much of a trash and rape type, rape and burn and punt it over or whatever type of game at all. And 18OE is very similar in that fashion. But this one just didn't add enough to excite me. So I'm at 18OE because that's the next one. Ugh. It's an incredibly large box, and if you use these little planos, which are very useful for storing the counters in, they had to be bought separately, they don't all fit in the box. It's a very full box. Basically, with everything, this is jam-packed. The board is humongous. The tracks and the hexes are very, very small. I wish I could find the rules easily. Okay, I'm not going to dig through this too much. So this has similarities with 18EU, which kind of would make sense because, hey, they're the same subject matter, sort of, right? Except it doesn't feel like they particularly make much sense. It doesn't feel like they feel more like a realism decision to make those track junctures the way they do than any kind of realism in respect to a European railway in comparison to other railways. So it's like playing around with the different kinds of stock markets. You almost feel like one of these is closer to right than the others. They can't all be right, and it's not really, the stock market isn't really, or the way that companies capitalize isn't really that different between Canada and the US. So 56 and 30 having different capitalizations is just more of the designer trying to fix something, I think, that they see as a realism problem. And this track situation I see is the same kind of answer. Like I said, though, I don't think it plays. I think it has some negative effects on play, especially late in the game, and especially for 18OE, because 18OE, the map's so much bigger. I mean, it is a huge map. It looks like you should be playing a war game on it. It has tons and tons of companies, and the companies start in different ways. So you have your miners, but then you also have regional companies, and the regional companies can be promoted into national companies. Now, the national companies are something completely new in this. They're not like the nationals and the others where things crash into them. Although the way you generate them is usually I can't really afford a train on this. I think I'll switch it to a national, because the nationals are allowed to run obsolete trains. But the way they run them isn't the standard 18XX way. You don't count runs and all that. What you do is you count cities that are connected to one another within your national boundary. And the company begins to like it can lay track for free and stuff like that. This also gives you track points. Most of the games give you, hey, you can lay 1 or 2 tiles, maybe 2. The ones that give you 2 usually don't let you do an upgrade, or don't let you do 2 upgrades if you're doing the 2 tiles. What this does is just says, okay, you're this kind of company, you get this many track points, and different things that you do that you lay track into cost different amounts of track points. So a plain yellow tile, I think, only costs 1 track point, but a metropolis will cost double the normal track point values, and upgrades cost like 2 track points as well. So if you're going from like a yellow to a green tile, and that ends up being an interesting limiter where only certain, and I played it wrong, but only certain only certain companies at the regional level have enough. Well, only certain minor companies, I think, and maybe it's private, allow you to like upgrade cities beyond their starting, yellow track, which you may either lay down or upgrade. Metropolises, not cities, special big cities. So things like the London area or the Berlin area or something. Well, someone is going to have that special minor or private, and wherever they are, the world's going to be richer. And I feel like that, although historically accurate perhaps, I mean, who knows what the mechanism works out as, but the fact that you have an industrial revolution in one area where it gets much richer is correct. But in terms of the play, I kind of question what that would do. Now, the way I played it, I screwed that up, so I don't have a real insight into what effect it has, especially not just on early money or whatever, but also on the overall pacing of the game. Some people are limited, and most areas of the board just will not develop in the same way. The game has the concept of an Orient Express train, which kind of reminds me a little of the 1870 Destination. What happens is, if you run an Orient Express train, first of all, you're running from a certain major metropolis, and there's only a limited number of them you're allowed to run, make as part of your Orient Express run, all the way to Constantinople. And if you make that whole route, you get a bonus. And the bonus is based on the phase of the game. It starts out pretty small. But the other bonus that comes from it, and it's just a cash bonus in the run, the other bonus that comes from it is the first time you do this, you get a special bonus operating ground where you get to run, you get to pay that train out a second time. And like in 1870 with the destinations, the bell ringers or whatever, and I don't know if I went into too much detail with them when I talked about it, but that's one of the cool things with it. When you reach the destination, you get an extra bonus run, and you can either pay that out and increase your stock value, or you can just swallow it and you don't go back for it. And this has something similar. You can just take that extra money and not go back. This is a humongous thing. It's got just so much going on in it, but not a lot of really fancy, it doesn't allow the mergers or anything like that. It's got this idea of track rights where the different regional and minors are limited to certain geographical areas. But then when they become major companies, the track rights don't completely disappear, but they just become a potential. Certain of the track rights give you an economic benefit when building through expensive terrain. And they just stop having the same effect. And I was kind of hoping the track rights would be something similar to what's going on in 1841. And I feel like maybe they were intended to be that way initially, where the major corporations kind of have to get their track rights, but eventually those track rights, the essential thing of the track rights, which is the ability to actually build track in those areas, that just accrues to all the major companies. Another big thing in it is it has ports. Some other, I don't know if 60 has something like this or whatever, but you're allowed to like sail out at sea with your trains, and these cost you off your number of your train, and therefore make you hit less cities. But it's kind of necessary. There's also ferries, which can cost you the same kind of thing, but link you between a couple of cities. And then there's port authorities and control of port cities with a dot or whatever give you reductions in the penalty that you spend for going across. And that's kind of a big deal because like North and South America are in the game, and you can make shipping runs to those in order to get what you need. Now my battery is almost dead, so we'll try swapping again. There's not much left. Unfortunately, my final video for 18OE, where I do the wrap, and my review for 18OE got eaten. A couple of things worked together to cause this. The biggest one is the way YouTube presents videos to delete. It shows you 30 videos per page and tells you you're deleting more than 25 videos if you're deleting between 26 and 30. And I had like 27 videos that I was deleting to build this up, and ended up accidentally deleting 29 or something like that, or 30. And I got rid of those two, and then I think one of my video rants went away as well. So I'll try to sum up at least my impression on it, which is, first of all, the reason for 18OE, as far as I'm concerned, is its tremendous scope, and just how big it is, how many different companies it has in it, the interactions and everything on that scale, on that size. But the problem is, I look at an 18xx game as being a certain length, and I'm probably used to playing them kind of slower than some people, but to me, the 1830 length runs somewhere around 5 or 6 hours. Okay, 1870 goes significantly longer than that, as does 2038. And that, maybe if we played in a faster crowd, maybe if I was faster, these games would not be as unappealing to me as they are. They just drag and drag and drag. This one just blows all of that out of the water. I mean, it's at least a 12-hour game. I think it's longer than that. I think it's more like 15, 16 hours to play the whole thing. Now, there are scenarios in it, but again, the reason for it is the scope. I don't really feel like the other aspects of it are delightful enough to want. Now, I think it's a much, much better game than 18EU. 18EU almost completely disappointed me. And I bought 18EU because I was pretty sure I would never buy 18OE. Well, I got a deal on 18OE and where it was local, and I'm like, well, if I don't have to pay shipping and it's a little bit off price-wise, yeah, I gotta do it. I gotta try it at least. There's just so much to keep track of, and even for just one of the players, and it holds up to 7. And of course, I played 7-player. Even with just one player, you've got quite a bit to keep track of, and it's not like the rules are terribly complex. It's not like 1841, which, good God. But I'll probably play 41 before I touch this again, just because of the size of it. But I mean, it gets to this point where there's not a lot gonna happen. There's nothing to. It just doesn't feel like anything dramatic to shake up the game. Now you could say, well, gee, okay, so you like the 1830 style with a lot of, or 56 with a lot of sharp, actions and everything. Yeah, but I enjoyed 1861 too, and I felt like that was very placid and very clean and everything. This just, I don't know, it felt bland, and it felt like I had to, even with the funky aspects of, being able to merge companies into each other and everything, I felt like I had to spend way too much effort figuring out the proper track routes and not enough effort doing the things that I really kind of enjoy in an 18XX. I'm not quite sure what those are. Dicking people over, watching the trains fall at ridiculous rates, or get stuck when they shouldn't, stuff like that. The most recent that I picked up was 1846. This is a GMT one. Very, very beautiful components. They did a fantastic job on them. The one thing that's different from most of them, though, is the hexes, unlike in 18OE, where they're smaller, have been blown up. And I don't think this was the case in the original. I've played the original a couple of times. I don't think it was this. I don't think the hexes were this big. But they've kind of blown them up. This is a smaller, lighter one in a lot of ways, but boy, can it actually be pretty damn harsh. It has, I think it's full capitalization. Nope, it's partial capitalization. You can redeem your shares. But one of the big things with this one is, no. 1854 is the one where this is the case. In 1854, there's no easy way to get money into your companies. Well, there is one. There's mail routes. But yeah, once your company, once you sell your stock or whatever happens, and I believe it's full cap. So once you float, you get a pile of money, and that's what you've got. The only way you're going to get cash into your company is by swallowing. You don't get anything off excess shares in either your bank, in treasury or bank pool. This one, however, is a partial cap where you get money off the treasury shares. You are able to redeem the shares and pull them back in. And this is the one with the really interesting capability. Yeah, this is Tom Lehman. So you're able to release your shares. You don't have to rely on investors. So one of the problems in an 18XX partial cap especially is sometimes you need money for your train. And the only way to do it, 56 has this problem pretty desperately. The only way to do it, because you have to hold 50% of your company if you're selling a share of it, or someone else can take it over. But you can only hold 60% in most of these games. So what you kind of have to do is you have to buy 60% of your company and then sell a share, and that hurts your stock price and all that. And then buy a share on your next turn, because you can't buy a share after you sell it, on your next set of stock round, your next stock round. And you just have this sort of slow progression trying to feed your shares out if nobody's willing to buy them. Now, if you've got a great stock, or if there's a big arbitrage difference between the initial offering and what the company shares are currently worth, people will buy them up. But if you haven't managed that, then the only way to get the shares out into the public for loans or whatever is to slowly release them. In this, you're allowed to take the shares from the company treasury and toss them into the bank pool, and the company gets the cash for that. Now, there's a limitation on that, just like there's a limitation on loans and stuff. The limitation here is you can only throw so many shares out that basically other players have. So, if you buy 20% of the company, you can only release 2 more shares into the bank pool. Shares are always going to be the partial caps, a lot of them, this one included, have shares are always bought and sold at the value that the company currently is trading at. They're not treated, there's nothing special about an initial offering or anything. You'll see that over in 61, which I just did. This has a flat stock track. it's an interesting one. So you can pay out none. You can swallow. You can pay a half, full, or swallow. Now, if you pay nothing, you're going to go back. But you also go back if you pay less than half of your stock value. And if you pay your stock value up to double, you go forward one space. If you pay between double and triple, you go forward two spaces. This sounds like 1829. If you go back, if you pay a triple or more, you're going to go forward three spaces, but only if you start in the high value range. That makes it really hard to pay out triple, but it also prevents you from jumping forward and using that mechanism in quite the same way that you can use in the games where it's completely free to use. This one has bankruptcy for players as normal. You got to pay a train, you don't have the cash, you can't raise it. But unlike some of the others, the game doesn't end on bankruptcy. The game ends when the bank runs out. Is that the only time? There may be others. I made a lot of a huge example of play in here. It's a 13-page rule book called 12, and they bloated it out to 23 pages with. But, some of it's useful, some of it's play-aid type stuff. I think there's cards that also go there. I know 54 and 44 can give you some nice play-aid cards, some of which are wrong. But there's historical notes, which I'm not really too used to someone taking the time for. But then there's an example of play. In part because this might be intended to be kind of a starter 18xx, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. I don't remember what I was talking about. Probably bankruptcy. End of game. Yeah. So, the game ends based on the bank running out of money, and you finish that set of operating rounds. But if a player goes bankrupt, they're out of the game. The shares that they couldn't sell, like of their company or whatever, go into kind of a receivership in the bank pool, and they'll run, but generally they'll run and eventually become viable companies again. Is there anything else that really excited me about this? So I thought this one dumbfounded me, and it has continued to do so. I've played it 3 times. I don't feel like I have a very good grasp at all of what's going on in it. Again, one of the people that I really... Two people who I think... one whom I really respect on XX, which is Clear Claw, and then Rex Styles gave this one play, and kind of had by the time he was midway through the game, he thought there was nothing here. Now, this game completely befuddles me, so either I'm really, really stupid, they're seeing and included in that, they're seeing something that I just can't see. Now, for him to see it in one play, that really implies that I'm a fucking idiot, because I do not have a grasp on how this sucker holds together. The trains can come out really fast. The whole cycle can be very surprising and very shocking. And sometimes, one of the times I did okay, obviously playing solitaire. It started out 5 players, 3 of them went bankrupt, I think, right? No, 2 of them went bankrupt. That's almost, it's almost unheard of for someone to go bankrupt in my solo games. So whatever my standard approach to XX is doesn't work here, for some of the players, at least. Some got away with it, or something similar to that standard approach. And whatever, when I played it posed, one time I did okay. One time it was very noisy and I couldn't quite concentrate as well, but I just felt like I had nothing. I couldn't do anything anymore. I think this is a game that has a tendency to knock people out, or at least knock them close to out very quickly, and it has a tendency to let people get a jump that is hard to overcome. I don't necessarily mind that. You can always concede, It becomes maybe determined by that early game much more than the early and mid game, much more than the late game. But that's okay. That's kind of like 30 to me. And this one plays a little faster. It gives you a real harshness value to it. So I actually see a lot to this. It's a different kind of harshness. People aren't slapping the stocks around. Stock price only goes down if the director sells it. Stuff like that, that prevent. There's some potential for rape and dump, but it's not strong like in 1830, and largely it's try to optimize, run for that early quick money, and get yourself off to a hell of a start. And that may be what is turning people off of it, is that there's really only one way to do this. What turns me off of it a bit is that initial offering for this. So the way the initial offering works in this is you're given most of the privates, not all, and you pick one and you put it down and you get to pay for it later, and you have to be able to pay for them all, and you hand the rest. You shuffle what you didn't pick and put it under the deck, and the next person gets some of the ones that you didn't choose and some of the ones you didn't see, and it just keeps going around like this. It makes it harder. You can't walk into the game with okay, let's see if I can get the D&H and the Mohawk and Hudson together, then I can build this kind of track this early and do this, and all kind of stuff like that. So I kind of don't like being shunted away from that level of pre-planning, and it feels like an incredibly random thing to start the game off with, where you're handed this deck. You might be missing the best railway, the best privates, and then you're just out because everybody else is going to see them before you do, and they're just going to be gone. So I don't like how that plays out particularly. It's not bad solo, but I don't like how it plays out in the real game, in an opposed game of it. Especially since the game's so reliant on, the early money thing, right? So if you get that good hand, if you get a couple good picks for that could just determine who wins right away. All right, let's talk about the Who. So, if I was going to pick some games that I say are good for starters, this one is not a bad starting game in terms of the complexity, in terms of length of time. It's got the real advantage that it can actually be played in a short number of players. Other ones that I suggest for that are I remember 1860 being somewhat similar to this, actually, and playing pretty well in short, a small number of players. I played 1860 about the same time that I played this for the first time, and the two reminded me a great deal of each other. 1889 is not a bad starting game. I haven't even talked about it much, but the 18AL, 18GA, the print and play. If you want to see if you hate 18XX or not, go ahead. It's close enough to the 1830 experience and a little bit milder, so it's not a bad starting game. But I still think that 1830 is the best to start with, and the reason why And why I say 1846 and maybe 1860 aren't so good for it comparatively. 1846 especially is very, very different from 1830 and from, and okay, so what? It's different from one game. And the majority of the 18XX games, I think, are built on the 30 model, more or less. 35 is definitely built on the 30 model more than the 29 model. 1846 is built on not even the 29 model, which is horrible, but something that's kind of similar to it and kind of has it's in its own world, which is to say that the lessons you learn from 1846 are not the lessons you learn, are not the lessons that you can carry over to too many other games. In 1830, the lessons you learn can be carried over to just about everything to some degree or another, except maybe 1846. In particular, if you want, something a little shorter and where you're not putting in a 6-hour investment or 8-hour investment, maybe if it's your first time and you're really kind of chugging through it slowly. The 1830 short game is exceptionally good. It is brutal little knife fight. It doesn't give you the full scope of the 1830 building towards the long game. And that's what like 18OE really gives you, is that huge building towards the long game. You have this, it's a very long game and there's so much space and everything to cover that you have so much pre-planning to do. But because it ends up so open, it ends up just being, hey, can you get the right trains and maybe the right dots? So these are the ones I would suggest for it. If you're really kind of scared of jumping in, I think Baltimore and Ohio is a pretty strong option for getting your feet wet as well, because it gives you something that's fairly similar in a lot of ways to the 1830 experience. You don't have the track though. You have the little cubes or whatever. But I thought it held up pretty well in terms of stock manipulation and stuff, which I feel like that's one of the things you want to look into, But again, not all the 18XX games rely as heavily on stock manipulation. 1830 is one of the heavier ones. 1856. The ones that are based on 30 directly tend to rely heavily on stock manipulation. The ones that are less based on it, people, and some of them, like 35, don't look like 35 is not a great option, but some of them look like they might have a fair amount of stock manipulation. They have the big, two-dimensional stock track. It looks like you can slap things around. There's nothing maybe preventing you from it. 2038 is actually an example of this. But people don't want to get rid of their shares to the same degree that they're willing to. People don't want to get rid of their corporations to the same degree that they're willing to in 1830, which means you're not going to have the rape and dumps that happen with the same frequency, because the extra certificate is just too important in them. It's not always for all the 18. It's not always the case in 1830. It's certainly not in 1856. Quite often, you've got disposable companies, and I like that level of dickiness in it. B&O, I don't know if it's quite at that level, but it's there. I know with the French one, I also was the 1826 or whatever. I was looking and playing, and when I was playing it, I felt like I couldn't get rid of companies that were underperforming. It just was not a good deal. In part because there's nothing new to open up. That's one of the things that you want when you want to dump a company. You need a new company to open up, right? So in 1830, there's the desire to dump a company, and in 56, there's a desire to dump a company fairly early in the game. You made some great money off of it. It looks pretty questionable. It may not be terrible for the person you dump it on, by the way. My rule with 1830 was always the second person who owns the B&O is the one who wins, because you either can steal it from someone and win that way, because you've you weren't tied up in running it, Or someone dumps it and now it's at a low stock value and a lot of shares in the bank pool, and you can just run it all the time and take that cash into your treasury and turn it into a reasonable set of trades later, and you have this great early track. And but anyway, that's advice on the early ones. I'll be getting 1880 later. That's supposed to be interesting too, but that's not going to be one that you'd start with. The 18AL and GA are not terrible choices, but I don't know. I'd rather go with B&O. I think it's a little harder. All right, that's some thoughts on the 18XX games. I know I didn't get it as, there's this blind spot, and 1861 was the start of the blind spot, and I really apologize for that. I do have videos where I go play them and come back with my thoughts right at the time, which are probably better than this anyway, but this gives you a smattering of feels, and at least I can give you the impressions on those ones that I didn't really remember too well. 1860 I remember really kind of enjoying, and 1841, if you're interested in 1841, you don't need to hear me. You already know it's overblown, it's big, it's got tons of difficult rules, and it may have some ambiguities as well. And that's actually the thing I don't remember if I mentioned this. That's one of the things that I don't like about the 54, especially. The rules are not entirely solid. All right, let's send this one up.